Come on, Daisy. Come on. You're the only person who ever saw me. Please don't leave me. 8-year-old Sawyer Hollis slammed both hands against the 5-year-old girl's chest and pushed. Her lips were blue. Her blonde curls were stuck to mud and canal water. She hadn't taken a breath in 3 minutes. His arms burned, his tears mixed with river water running down his face. He pushed harder. Behind him, a trailer park full of strangers stood frozen with their phones raised, filming a homeless boy begging a dead girl to breathe. He didn't know her father was the president of the Hells Angels. Didn't know 30 motorcycles were already thundering toward this canal bank. Didn't know the girl he was trying to bring back to life was his own blood. Hit that subscribe button right now and follow this story all the way to the end. Drop a comment with the city you're watching from so I can see just how far this story travels. Because what you're about to hear will stay with you long after it's over. Sawyer's hands were too small for this. That was the only thought his brain could hold as he locked his fingers together over Daisy Raines's chest and pushed down with everything his 62-pound body could give. The mud beneath his knees was cold enough to burn. The canal water still dripping from his hair ran down his face, and mixed with something he refused to admit were tears. 1, 2, 3, 4. He counted the way the fireman on the shelter TV had counted 6 months ago. Sawyer had been sitting cross-legged on a dirty floor, waiting for his mother to finish her intake interview, watching a CPR demonstration he never thought he'd need. The fireman had used a plastic dummy. Sawyer was using a real girl. A girl who'd given him a peanut butter sandwich 4 days ago and changed the entire direction of his life without knowing it. 15, 16, 17. Come on, Daisy, come on. Her chest felt wrong under his hands. Too soft, too small, like pressing on a bird. He was terrified he was breaking her ribs, more terrified of stopping. 28, 29, 30. He tilted her head back the way the fireman showed, pinched her nose, sealed his mouth over hers, and blew. Her chest rose slightly. He blew again. Nothing. No cough, no gasp. No sign that Daisy Raines was anything other than a body cooling on a muddy canal bank in Shelby County, Tennessee. Come on, please. You're the only person who ever saw me. Please don't leave. He started compressions again. His arms burned. His shoulders screamed. 8 years old and performing CPR and not knowing if he was doing it right or killing her faster. Around him, voices floated like ghosts through fog. Oh my God, is she dead? Somebody call 911. Who is that kid? Is he homeless? He looks homeless. Someone should help him. Nobody helped him. Nobody moved. They filmed. They watched. They whispered. And Sawyer kept pushing because that's what invisible kids learn to do. You don't wait for help. Help doesn't come for people like you. You save yourself or you die. And right now, saving himself meant saving her. 1, 2, 3, 4. His mind flashed back 9 days. 9 days that had changed everything. 9 days that led to this muddy bank and this blue-lipped girl and these compressions that were either saving a life or just postponing a death. 9 days ago, Sawyer Hollis had been running for 6 months straight. Not the kind of running where your feet hit pavement and your lungs burn and someone blows a whistle at the end. The kind where you run from a gas station bathroom because your mother is dead on the floor with a needle in her arm and foam coming out of her mouth. And you're 8 years old and you know if you stay, they'll put you in the system. The system eats kids like Sawyer, chews them up, spits out something broken. He'd seen it happen to other kids in shelters, watch their eyes go empty, watch them stop fighting. So he ran. His mother's name was Jolene. Jolene Hollis, though she'd been Jolene Parker and Jolene Webb and Jolene something else before that. She used names the way other people use tissues. Pick one up, use it, throw it away, grab another. They'd moved 11 times in 8 years. Motels where the sheets smelled like cigarettes and the locks didn't work. Cars when the money dried up. Shelters when Jolene could hold herself together long enough to answer intake questions without her hands shaking too bad. Sawyer learned early, learned that mothers weren't always mothers. Sometimes they were storms you survived until the weather cleared. Sometimes the weather never cleared. Sometimes the storm just got worse until it killed everything, including itself. Jolene had loved him. He believed that, had to believe that. She'd held him when he was scared, sang to him when the withdrawals hadn't eaten her voice yet, taught him how to be invisible, because invisible was the only safe thing a boy like him could be. Don't let them see you, baby. Don't let them notice. If they notice, they take. They always take. She was right about that. The world took everything. Took his mother. Took his childhood. Took 6 months of his life and turned them into a blur of dumpster food and church donation bins and sleeping under bridges and learning that cold could kill you just as dead as bullets. Tennessee to Memphis, hitchhiking in truck beds when drivers didn't check, walking when there were no trucks, eating whatever he could find, stealing when he had to, which was more often than he wanted to admit. A boy alone on American roads in winter. The kind of story that ends in a morgue or a missing persons file that nobody ever opens. But Sawyer survived. He was good at surviving. It was the only thing he was good at. 9 days ago, he'd found the trailer park, edge of Shelby County, backed up against a drainage canal that flooded when it rained. A row of trailers, some decent, some falling apart, all of them housing people who'd learned to mind their own business, because minding other people's business got you hurt in places like this. The trailer at the end was different, bigger, cleaner. A Harley Davidson sat in the driveway like a chrome animal sleeping in the sun. The trailer had a crawl space underneath, and the crawl space had heating pipes running through it, and those pipes were warm. Warm meant alive. For Sawyer, that calculation was simple enough that even an 8-year-old could do it. He crawled under that trailer at midnight, pressed his body against the warm pipes, and slept for the first time in 3 days. Deep, dreamless, the sleep of someone whose body had simply run out of ways to stay awake. He didn't know the trailer belonged to Colton James Raines. Road name, Colt. President of the Hells Angels Memphis chapter. 6'3", 240, dirty blonde hair pulled back in a knot, full beard, hands that could crush walnuts without trying. The kind of man whose voice made rooms go quiet and whose name made people cross streets. He didn't know Colt had a daughter. He found out on day 2. Sawyer was lying flat in the crawl space, making himself small, making himself nothing, when he heard small feet on the floor above him. Light steps, quick, a child's feet. Then a voice. "Daddy, can I play outside?" "Stay where I can see you, baby girl." The voice that answered was deep, heavy, the kind of voice that carried weight even when it was being gentle, like a big dog trying not to step on a kitten, careful, uncertain, trying hard at something that didn't come naturally. Sawyer heard the door open and close, heard those small feet hit dirt, then silence except for a little girl talking to herself, carrying on conversations with people who didn't exist, creating friends from nothing because nothing was all she had. He recognized that. He'd done that. When Jolene was gone on her benders and Sawyer was alone in whatever motel room they'd landed in, he'd talk to imaginary people for hours, give them names, give them lives, give them the things he didn't have. Stability, parents who came home, refrigerators with food in them. He watched the girl through a gap in the trailer's skirting, blonde curls bouncing, blue eyes wide with the kind of fearless energy that comes from being 5, and not yet understanding that the world hurts small things. She chased a cat across the yard, laughing, tripping, getting up, laughing again. Her name was Daisy. He learned that when Colt called her in for dinner. "Daisy, come eat." "Coming, Daddy." Day 3, day 4. Sawyer watched, cataloged, learned. That's what surviving taught you. Learn the patterns. Learn who comes and goes. Learn when it's safe and when it's not. Colt left every morning at 6, motorcycle roaring to life, shaking the whole trailer, vibrating through Sawyer's teeth where he lay pressed against the warm pipes. Gone until afternoon, sometimes later. Club business, meetings, whatever Hell's Angels presidents did during the day. Different women came to watch Daisy, wives and girlfriends of club members, rotating shifts, none of them staying long enough to form bonds. Sawyer heard Daisy ask one of them once, her small voice carrying clearly through the thin floor. "Are you my new mommy?" "No, honey, I'm just watching you for your daddy." "Where's my real mommy?" Silence. The kind of silence adults use when they don't know how to tell a child that their mother is dead and never coming back, and the world doesn't hand out replacements no matter how much you need one. "She's in heaven, sweetie." "Is heaven nice?" "It's really nice." "Then why did Daddy cry last night? If Mommy's somewhere nice, why is he so sad?" More silence. Longer this time. Then the woman's voice, cracking at the edges. "Because he misses her, baby, that's all. He just misses her." Sawyer pressed his face against the dirt under the trailer and squeezed his eyes shut because he understood that question. He understood it in his bones. Why did people cry if the dead were somewhere better? Because the living were still here, still broken, still walking through rooms that used to have someone in them and now had nothing but air and memory. Day 5 changed everything. Sawyer was lying in the crawl space, afternoon sun making the pipes almost too hot to touch, when he heard a sound that made his heart stop. Small hands pulling at the trailer skirting, small knees hitting dirt, small body crawling into the space that was supposed to be Sawyer's invisible fortress. Daisy Raines came face to face with a homeless boy 3 feet from where she slept every night. Sawyer froze, complete shutdown, every muscle locked, every breath held. If she screamed, it was over. If her father found him, a Hell's Angels president finding a stranger living under his daughter's bed, there was no version of that story that ended well for Sawyer. But Daisy didn't scream. She tilted her head, looked at him with those blue eyes that were too smart for 5, and she said the words that would save both their lives 4 days later. "Are you hiding from the monsters too?" Sawyer couldn't speak, couldn't move, could barely think, but he nodded, because yes, he was hiding from monsters. Different monsters than hers maybe, but monsters all the same. Daisy crawled closer. No fear, none at all. The reckless trust of a child who hadn't yet learned that strangers could be dangerous. "I hide sometimes, under my bed. When Daddy's friends come over and they're loud and scary, they wear big jackets and yell a lot. But Daddy says they're not mean, they're just loud." She paused. "You want a sandwich? Mommy always said you give sandwiches to people who are sad. You look really sad." Before Sawyer could answer, before he could even process what was happening, Daisy crawled back out and disappeared. 2 minutes later, she was back, carrying half a peanut butter sandwich in one hand, a juice box in the other, and a blanket tucked under her arm. The sandwich was smashed. The juice box was warm. The blanket smelled like fabric softener and something Sawyer hadn't smelled in 6 months. Childhood, safety, home. Here. She pushed everything toward him. "Don't worry, I won't tell Daddy. He gets really mad about strangers. He's in a motorcycle club, the Hell's Angels. They're really, really tough. But I think you need this more than I need it. That's what Mommy would say." Sawyer took the sandwich. His hands shook so hard he almost dropped it. The bread was soft. The peanut butter was thick. It was the most delicious thing he'd ever tasted in his entire life, because it was given freely by someone who saw him when the entire world had learned to look through him. "What's your name?" Daisy asked. "Sawyer. I'm Daisy. Are you going to live under our house?" "Just until it gets warm." "Okay," she said it like he'd told her the sky was blue. Simple, obvious, A boy living under her trailer was no stranger than imaginary friends, or monsters in closets, or mothers who lived in heaven but couldn't come home. I'll bring you food. Every day. Promise. But you gotta be really quiet because Daddy has a gun and I don't want him to shoot you. Sawyer's stomach tightened. A gun. Of course. Hell's Angels president. Gun. I'll be quiet. Good, Daisy smiled. It was the first real smile anyone had given Sawyer in 6 months. You're my secret friend now. I never had a secret friend before. This is so cool. She crawled out. Sawyer sat in the dark holding a peanut butter sandwich and a juice box and a blanket, and something cracked open in his chest. Something he'd sealed shut the day his mother died. Something that felt dangerous and fragile and absolutely necessary. Hope. He hated it. Hope got you killed. Hope made you stupid. Hope made you stay in places you should leave and trust people you should run from. But he couldn't stop it. Couldn't unfeel a 5-year-old girl's kindness. Couldn't unhear, Mommy always said you give sandwiches to people who are sad. 4 days, that's how long the secret lasted. Daisy brought food every day, always peanut butter sandwiches because it was the only thing she could make herself. Sometimes crackers, once an apple with a bite already taken out of it because she forgot she'd started eating it. Always a juice box. Always that same whispered phrase when she crawled under the trailer. Hey, secret friend, I brought you food. You still hiding from the monsters? Still hiding. Me too. We can hide together. That's better than hiding alone, right? Right. In return, Sawyer left her small things. A bird feather, blue and iridescent, found near the canal. A smooth stone, perfectly round from the creek bed. A drawing of a cat he'd made with a pencil stub, because she loved cats and he'd noticed. Small offerings, the only currency an 8-year-old homeless boy had. At night, Sawyer heard things through the trailer floor. Daisy's nightmares. She had them every night, screaming about a car, about fire, about a woman trapped, about glass and metal, and someone named Mommy who couldn't get out. Sawyer pressed his hands over his ears those nights, not because the sound was loud, but because it was familiar. He knew what it sounded like when a child screamed for a mother who was never coming back. He'd made those same sounds in gas station bathrooms, in motel rooms, in shelters where the walls were thin enough that everyone heard, but nobody came. But he also heard Colt. Every nightmare the man was there. Heavy boots crossing the floor, door opening, voice shifting from thunder to something trying desperately to be gentle. It's okay, baby girl. Daddy's here. It was just a dream. You're safe. I want Mommy. I know you do. But I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. Promise? Promise. Sawyer listened to those conversations and felt something complicated. Jealousy, maybe. Or grief. Or both twisted together so tight he couldn't separate them. Because nobody had ever come running when Sawyer screamed. Nobody had ever held him and said, Daddy's here. Nobody had ever promised not to leave. Day 8. Sawyer heard something that changed everything again. 3 motorcycles pulled up outside the trailer. Not the normal club visits. These were different. The engines sounded angry. The boots that hit the ground were heavy with purpose. And the voices that followed carried the kind of tension that Sawyer recognized from years of living in places where violence happens suddenly and without warning. Colt, we need to talk. The door opened, closed, boots on the floor above Sawyer's head. He pressed himself flat, barely breathing, listening. 3 voices, Colt's and 2 others. One belonged to a man called Briggs. Sawyer had heard the name before in other conversations. Vice president of the chapter. The voice was cold, calculated, the kind of voice that measured every word for maximum damage. This kid situation is becoming a problem, Colt. My daughter is not a situation, Briggs. She's a liability. You're distracted, soft, missing meetings because she has nightmares. Turning down runs because you can't find a babysitter. The club doesn't run on bedtime stories and juice boxes. Choose your next words real carefully. I'm choosing them for both of us. She needs to go. Foster care, boarding school, relatives, whatever. The club comes first. Always has. You wrote that rule yourself. Silence. The kind that fills a room before an explosion. Then Colt's voice, so low Sawyer had to press his ear flat against the floor to hear. If you ever suggest separating me from my daughter again, I will break every bone in your body. Then I'll start on the parts that don't have bones. Are we clear? Crystal. But the club's going to vote, Colt. And when they do, sentiment won't save you. Numbers will. And I've got the numbers. The door slammed hard enough to shake dust from the crawlspace beams into Sawyer's eyes. Motorcycles roared away, and Sawyer lay in the dark, understanding something that made his blood cold. Briggs didn't just want Colt to step down. Briggs wanted Daisy gone. And men like Briggs, men with cold voices and calculated words, and the patience to count votes before making threats, men like that didn't stop at suggestions. They escalated. They found ways. They made problems disappear. Sawyer knew this because he'd lived among men like Briggs his whole short life. The kind who smiled while they planned. The kind his mother had been afraid of. The kind who made people vanish. Day 9, the day everything ended and everything began. Sawyer had decided to leave. The tension was too much. The danger was too close. He'd survived 6 months by knowing when to disappear, and every instinct he'd developed screamed that this place was about to explode. He was packing his things. The blanket Daisy gave him, the pencil stub, the bird feathers she'd returned to him as a gift. Everything he owned fit in a plastic grocery bag. Then he heard the splash, not from rain, not from the canal's normal current, the heavy, violent sound of a small body hitting cold water fast. The sound of something going wrong in a way that couldn't be taken back. Then the screaming, "Daddy! Daddy, help! The water! Daddy!" Daisy's voice, high and terrified and already weakening as the canal current pulled her under and spun her and filled her mouth with water that was too cold and too fast for a 5-year-old to fight. Sawyer's body moved before his brain gave permission. He scrambled from the crawlspace, ran toward the canal, 40 feet of muddy yard between him and the bank. His 2 big shoes slipped on wet grass. He fell, got up, ran harder. He could see her, blonde curls going under, small arms thrashing, blue lips already forming, the current dragging her toward the culvert where the canal narrowed and deepened and would swallow a child like swallowing a leaf. Sawyer hit the water without stopping. The cold was a fist to his chest, knocked the air from his lungs, turned his muscles to stone. But he kicked, fought, grabbed at water and mud and current until his hand closed around fabric, Daisy's shirt. He pulled. She was heavier than he expected, waterlogged, limp. He dragged her onto the bank. Her eyes were closed. Her chest wasn't moving. Her lips were the color of the sky, right before a storm turns dangerous. No, 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 no. Daisy, Daisy, wake up, please. Nothing. No response, no breath, no sign that the girl who'd given him a sandwich and called him secret friend was anything but gone. Sawyer locked his fingers together, put the heel of his palm on her chest, and started pushing. 1, 2, 3, the way the firemen showed on the shelter TV 6 months ago, when Sawyer was just a kid waiting for his mother, and the future was still a thing that might include food and warmth and someone who cared. 15, 16, 17, come on, Daisy, come on. You saw me. You saw me when nobody else did. You can't leave. Please, I'll do anything. Just breathe. Just breathe once. 30 compressions, 2 breaths, tilt head, pinch nose, blow, watch for chest rise. Nothing. Again, 30 more, his arms screaming, his whole body shaking from cold and effort. and the kind of fear that lives in your throat and tastes like metal. People gathered, he barely noticed. Phones came out, red lights started blinking, recording. The world was recording an 8-year-old homeless boy trying to bring a 5-year-old girl back from the dead on a muddy canal bank while nobody moved to help. Come on, Daisy, come on. I didn't survive 6 months on the streets to watch you die. I didn't eat your sandwiches and hold your bird feather and listen to your nightmares to lose you now. Please. Another round, another 30 compressions. His technique was wrong, probably. His hands were too small. His pushes were too shallow, or too deep, or too fast, or too slow. He didn't care. He pushed because pushing was all he had. Because stopping meant she was dead, and he couldn't carry that. Not on top of his mother. Not on top of everything else. Not at 8 years old. Please, please, I'm begging you, don't make me be alone again. Then she coughed. Water erupted from her mouth. Her body convulsed. Her chest heaved once, twice, 3 times. And then she was breathing. Ragged, shallow, but breathing. Sawyer turned her on her side, held her head, watched water drain from her mouth and nose, and felt something break inside him that had been holding itself together through sheer stubbornness for 6 months. Sawyer. Her voice was barely a whisper. Raw, damaged, but hers. The water was so cold. You're okay. You're okay. Just breathe. Keep breathing. I fell. I was playing by the water and the fence was broken and I slipped and, don't talk, just breathe. Help is coming. But help wasn't what came first. First came the sound. Motorcycles. Not 1 or 2. The thunder of an army. Engines roaring from every direction, converging on the trailer park like a steel avalanche. The ground shook. The air vibrated. Sawyer felt it in his teeth, in his bones, in the part of his brain that had spent 6 months learning to identify danger by sound alone. 20, 30, 50 motorcycles poured onto the road, chrome and leather and fury in the coordinated movement of men who'd been riding together for decades. They filled every space, blocked every exit, created a wall of metal and muscle, and barely contained violence. The patches on their backs were all the same. Hell's Angels, Memphis chapter. Death head logos catching afternoon sun like warnings etched in leather. One motorcycle cut through the formation, bigger, louder. The rider was massive. He pulled off his helmet and Sawyer's stomach dropped through the earth. Colt Raines, Daisy's father. The man whose trailer Sawyer had been living under for 9 days. Colt's eyes found Daisy first. On the ground, soaking wet, coughing, being held by a boy he'd never seen before. A scrawny, soaking wet, homeless-looking boy with his hands still resting on his daughter's shoulders. Something shattered behind Colt's eyes. Fear so raw it looked like it could stop his heart. Then his gaze locked onto Sawyer, and everything changed. His hand moved to his waistband, to the gun Daisy had warned Sawyer about. His voice came out quiet, controlled, deadly in the way that quiet things are always more deadly than loud ones. Who are you, and why are you touching my daughter? Sawyer's mouth went dry. Around him, 30 Hell's Angels closed in, a circle of leather and judgment and men who would hurt him badly if they decided he was a threat. He was trapped, surrounded, holding the only thing keeping him alive. A 5-year-old girl who'd given him a peanut butter sandwich and called him friend when the whole world called him nothing. I saved her. Sawyer's voice came out stronger than he expected, stronger than it had any right to coming from an 8-year-old boy surrounded by the most dangerous men he'd ever seen. She fell in the canal. She wasn't breathing. I did CPR. Colt's jaw clenched. His hands stayed near the gun. His eyes moved from Sawyer to Daisy to Sawyer again, trying to do math that didn't add up, trying to understand how a strange child ended up saving his daughter on a muddy canal bank in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon. Where did you come from? Sawyer hesitated. The truth was dangerous. The truth meant admitting he'd been living under this man's trailer, sleeping 3 feet below where his daughter slept, invisible and uninvited, and technically trespassing in the home of a Hells Angels president who carried a gun and had just watched a stranger hold his child. But lies required energy Sawyer didn't have, and Daisy was coughing against his chest, her small hand gripping his shirt, and her voice cutting through everything. "Daddy, don't hurt him. He's my secret friend. He lives under our house. I've been giving him sandwiches." The silence that followed was the loudest thing Sawyer had ever heard. Colt Rains didn't move, didn't blink. His hand stayed on the gun at his waistband, and his eyes stayed on Sawyer, and the air between them turned solid enough to choke on. 30 Hells Angels standing in a circle, every one of them watching their president process the words his 5-year-old daughter had just dropped like a grenade into the mud. "He lives under our house. I've been giving him sandwiches. Daddy, don't hurt him." Colt's voice came out low, barely controlled, the voice of a man choosing every word like pulling pins from explosives. "How long?" Sawyer's throat closed. He tried to swallow, couldn't. "How long have you been under my trailer, kid?" 9 days. Sawyer forced the words out. They tasted like dirt and fear and the end of everything. 9 days. "I was just trying to stay warm, that's all. I wasn't going to hurt anyone. I wasn't going to steal anything. I just needed somewhere warm." Colt took one step forward. The bikers around him shifted. Leather creaked. Boots scraped gravel. Someone's hand moved toward a weapon. The collective energy of 30 dangerous men tilting toward violence like a scale tipping past the point of return. "You've been living under my daughter's bedroom for 9 days and I didn't know." It wasn't a question. It was a reckoning. The kind of statement a man makes when he realizes his entire understanding of his own life has been wrong, and the wrongness is standing in front of him, wearing clothes 2 sizes too big, and shaking from canal water and adrenaline. "Daddy, stop." Daisy's voice cut through everything, small but fierce. The voice of a child who'd made up her mind and would fight anyone who disagreed, even her father, even a room full of Hells Angels. "He saved me. He jumped in the water and pulled me out and pushed on my chest until I could breathe again. He's my friend, and you're scaring him." Something cracked behind Colt's eyes. Not softening exactly, more like a wall developing a fracture that would eventually bring the whole thing down. He looked at his daughter, soaking wet, muddy, shaking, but alive, breathing, holding onto a homeless boy's shirt like letting go meant drowning all over again. Garrett Tate stepped forward from the circle, sergeant at arms, late 40s, lean build, quiet the way dangerous men are quiet when they don't need volume to make a point. He had his phone in his hand, screen facing out. "Colt, you need to see this." "Not now." "Right now, brother." Garrett turned the phone. On the screen, shaky cell phone footage played. Sawyer dragging Daisy from the canal. Sawyer performing CPR on her tiny body. Sawyer's mouth on hers, breathing life back into blue lips. Sawyer's hands pushing on her chest with everything his small body could give. The audio picked up his voice. "Come on, Daisy, come on. You saw me when nobody else did. Please don't leave." The timestamp said the video had been uploaded 11 minutes ago. The view count was already at 40,000, climbing in real time as they stood there. 50,000, 60. Colt watched the video, watched it again. His expression shifted through something complicated and painful. Fear to disbelief to something that might have been gratitude if gratitude could coexist with the fury of discovering a stranger had been living 3 feet below your child. He looked at Sawyer, really looked, past the mud and the too big clothes and the hollow cheeks and the eyes that were too old for 8. Looked at this boy the way you look at something impossible that you can't deny because it's standing right in front of you, dripping canal water and shaking with cold. "Get him a blanket." Colt's voice was rough. Someone get this kid a blanket and get my daughter to a hospital. Now! Two bikers moved instantly. One wrapped a horse blanket around Sawyer's shoulders, rough wool that smelled like motor oil and cigarettes but was warm. Another scooped Daisy up, and she screamed, "No! I want Sawyer! Don't take me away from Sawyer!" Her hands reached back toward him, small fingers grasping at air. The panic in her voice was raw enough to stop everyone in their tracks. Colt's jaw tightened. "He comes with us." The words sounded like they cost him something, like admitting them physically hurt. "The kid comes with us. Nobody touches him until I figure out what the hell is happening." They loaded Daisy into a truck. Sawyer climbed in beside her because she wouldn't let go of his hand, and nobody was going to pry a 5-year-old girl's fingers off the boy who just saved her life. Not even her father. Not even 30 Hell's Angels. Daisy's grip was iron, and her eyes were fierce, and she stared down every adult who came near, like a dog protecting a bone it would die before surrendering. The hospital was 20 minutes away. Sawyer sat in the back seat with Daisy's head against his shoulder, her breathing still ragged, her body still shaking. Colt drove, didn't speak. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel, and the veins in his forearms stood out like cables pulled too tight. 6 blocks from the hospital, Colt finally spoke without turning around. "Where are your parents, kid?" Sawyer's chest tightened. The question he'd been running from for 6 months. The question that ended in social workers, in foster homes, in a system that ate children alive. "My mom's dead. Overdose. August." The truck swerved slightly. Colt's hands adjusted, steady, but the swerve said enough. "And your father?" "Never had one. Never met one. Mom never told me anything." Silence. The kind that fills a space when someone's doing math they don't want to finish. Then Colt, quieter now, the anger in his voice replaced by something heavier. "How old are you?" 8. 8 years old, living under my trailer, in November, for 9 days. Colt's voice cracked on the last word, just barely, a fracture you'd miss if you weren't listening for it. "And nobody knew. Nobody came looking for you. Nobody filed a report. Nobody knows I exist," Sawyer said. And he meant it in every way those words could be meant. Not just legally, not just administratively, existentially. Nobody knew Sawyer Hollis was alive. Nobody was looking. Nobody cared. He'd fallen through every crack in every system designed to catch children, and the ground had swallowed him whole. They reached the hospital. Daisy was taken in immediately. Smoke inhalation protocols, hypothermia checks, pediatric trauma team assembling with the organized urgency of people who'd trained for moments like this. Sawyer tried to follow, but a nurse stopped him. "Family only, sweetie." "He's my brother," Daisy screamed from the gurney, her voice carrying down the hallway with a ferocity that made 3 nurses turn their heads. "He's my brother and he saved my life. And if you don't let him come with me, I will scream so loud this whole hospital falls down." Colt looked at the nurse. The nurse looked at Colt. 6'3", Hell's Angels vest, murder in his eyes and a child on a gurney demanding the impossible. "Let him through," the nurse said. Sawyer sat beside Daisy's bed while doctors worked, held her hand. Didn't speak. Didn't need to. She gripped his fingers with the strength of someone who'd learned in the space of 15 minutes that the only thing standing between her and death was an 8-year-old boy who lived under her porch. Outside the room, Sawyer could hear voices. Colt and his brothers. Heated, urgent, words leaking through the door in fragments. "Someone check that canal bank. Check the fence. I want to know if it was rotted or if somebody cut it." Then Garrett's voice. Low. Careful. The voice of a man delivering information he knew would detonate. "Colt, there's something else. I ran the kid's story. His mother, Jolene Hollis. She died August 19th. Memphis PD has it listed as accidental overdose. No next of kin contacted because no next of kin was found. So, Jolene Hollis wasn't always Jolene Hollis. She changed her name, multiple times, used at least 4 different identities over the past decade. But her original name, the one she was born with, before she ran, before she changed everything. Just say it, Garrett. Jolene Rains. The silence that followed lasted exactly 4 seconds. 4 seconds that felt like 4 years. 4 seconds during which Colt's entire world rearranged itself into a shape he didn't recognize. That's not possible. His voice was barely audible through the door, but Sawyer heard every word. His body went rigid in the chair beside Daisy's bed. Jolene left Memphis 16 years ago. She was 17, ran off with some guy. Our parents died 2 years later. I never found her. I looked for years, spent money, hired people. She was gone, just gone. She was in Tennessee. Garrett's voice was steady. Moved around a lot. Motels, shelters, cars. Had a son, 8 years old, born March 7th, sandy brown hair. His name is Sawyer. Sawyer's hand tightened around Daisy's. His vision blurred. His ears roared with something that sounded like blood moving too fast through veins that were suddenly too small. You're telling me that kid, Colt's voice shattered, that homeless kid who's been living under my trailer, who just saved my daughter's life, is my sister's son, my nephew. That's what I'm telling you. The door opened. Colt stood in the frame. His eyes were red. His face was a landscape of grief and shock, and the terrible mathematics of understanding that his sister had been dead for 3 months, and her child had been starving on American streets while he lived 20 miles away. He looked at Sawyer, and Sawyer looked back, and for the first time the boy saw something in this massive, terrifying man's face that he recognized, because he'd worn it himself, every day for 6 months. Loss. Kid. Colt's voice broke. Your mother, was her name Jolene? Sawyer couldn't speak. His throat had sealed shut. He nodded. Jolene Rains? Sawyer shook his head. Hollis. Her name was Jolene Hollis. Before that, Colt took a step closer. Before she changed it, before she ran, did she ever tell you where she came from? Did she ever mention Memphis? Did she ever mention a brother? The room tilted. Sawyer gripped the bed rail to keep from falling. A brother. His mother had a brother. His mother had family. His mother had someone who'd been looking for her while she dragged Sawyer through motels and shelters and the slow-motion car crash of addiction. She never told me anything. The words came out like broken glass. Nothing about where she came from. Nothing about family. She said we didn't have any. She said it was just us. Colt closed his eyes. When he opened them, tears were running down his face. Actual tears tracking through road dust and fury and the carefully constructed hardness of a man who'd built his entire identity on being unbreakable. She was my baby sister, left when she was 17. I was 21, already in the club. She said she didn't want this life, said she was going to make something better for herself. I gave her money, told her to call. She never did. I looked for her for 5 years, spent every dollar I could spare, hired 3 different investigators. She changed her name so many times, used so many identities, it was like chasing smoke. He crossed the room, stood in front of Sawyer, this massive, terrifying man, looking down at a boy who weighed 62 pounds and was wearing stolen clothes and had just performed CPR on his cousin. You're my blood, kid. You're Jolene's son. And you've been sleeping in the dirt under my house while I had no idea you existed. Sawyer stared up at him. 8 years of nothing. 8 years of no father, no family, no one. 8 years of believing his mother when she said they were alone in the world. And the whole time, 20 miles away, a man with his mother's jaw and his mother's stubbornness had been looking for her. She was trying to protect me. Sawyer's voice was barely a whisper. From you, from the club, from this life. Colt flinched like he'd been slapped. She told me that the world was dangerous and the only way to survive was to be invisible. She said, never trust anyone, never stay too long, never let them find you. I thought she meant everyone, but she meant you. She meant the club. She was running from you. The words hung between them. Devastating. True. The kind of truth that cuts both ways and leaves everyone bleeding. She was wrong, Colt said. His voice was raw, wrecked. The voice of a man realizing that his own sister had been so afraid of his world that she'd chosen poverty and addiction and death over asking him for help. She was wrong about a lot of things, but she wasn't wrong about wanting to protect you. She just chose the wrong way to do it. Daisy stirred on the bed, opened her eyes, looked at her father crying, looked at Sawyer with his face twisted with shock. Her 5-year-old brain processed what it could. Daddy, why are you crying? Is Sawyer in trouble? No, baby. Colt wiped his face with the back of his hand. Sawyer's not in trouble. Sawyer's family. What kind of family? The best kind. The kind you find when you're not looking. Garrett appeared in the doorway. His face was tight. Whatever calm he'd been maintaining was cracking at the edges. Colt, we need to talk. Now. In private. Colt looked at Sawyer, then at Daisy, then at Garrett. The shift was instant. Father to president. Grief to alert. The kind of transition that happens when you've lived your entire adult life in a world where threats don't pause for emotional reunions. Stay with them, Colt told one of the bikers standing guard. Nobody in or out except medical staff. Nobody. He followed Garrett into the hallway, but the door didn't close all the way, and Sawyer, who'd spent 6 months surviving by listening to things he wasn't supposed to hear, pressed his head against the pillow and listened. The fence at the canal. Garrett's voice was low and urgent. It wasn't rotted. It was cut. Clean cut. Bolt cutters. Someone removed a 4-foot section of railing at the exact spot where the bank drops off into the deepest part of the current. Sawyer's blood went cold. That section was intact 2 days ago. I checked it myself when I did the property sweep on Tuesday. Someone cut it between Tuesday night and today. Someone who knew Daisy plays near that canal. Someone who knew exactly where she'd fall if the railing wasn't there. Colt's response was barely human. A sound that came from somewhere deeper than vocal cords. Primal. The sound of a father understanding that his daughter hadn't fallen into a canal. She'd been guided into a death trap. Briggs was supposed to be watching her today, Garrett continued. He called in sick. Said he had food poisoning, but his bike was spotted at the gas station half a mile from your place at 3:45. 20 minutes before the kid pulled Daisy out of the water. Sawyer's hands started shaking, not from cold this time, from memory, from a detail he'd buried under adrenaline and CPR and the desperate focus of keeping Daisy alive. He'd seen something. When he'd scrambled out from under the trailer and run toward the canal, in the split second before he hit the water, he'd glimpsed a figure, walking away from the bank, not running, walking, deliberate, calm. The walk of someone who'd done what they came to do and was leaving before the screaming started. The figure wore a leather vest, Hell's Angels patches, and on the right side of the vest, a custom patch Sawyer had never seen on any other biker. A skull with a knife through it. Unique, personal, the kind of patch a man wore to mark himself as different from the rest. Sawyer knew whose patch that was. He'd heard other bikers mention it during their late-night visits to Colt's trailer. Only one man in the Memphis chapter wore a skull and knife patch. Briggs, the vice president who'd told Colt that Daisy was a liability. The man who'd promised he had the numbers to force a vote. The man whose voice carried the cold patience of someone who planned violence the way architects plan buildings. Carefully, precisely, with an understanding that foundations had to crack before structures could fall. Sawyer's phone, the cracked, barely functional thing he'd stolen from a gas station counter 4 months ago, buzzed in his pocket. 1 bar of signal. 1 message from an unknown number. Little hero, little mistake, keep your mouth shut about what you saw at the canal, or next time nobody pulls her out. Stay quiet or she drowns for real. Sawyer stared at the screen. His reflection stared back, hollow-eyed, terrified. 8 years old and holding a secret that could save his cousin or get her killed. Briggs knew Sawyer had seen him, knew the boy could identify him, and was threatening a 5-year-old girl's life to keep him silent. Sawyer looked at Daisy sleeping in the hospital bed, machines beeping softly, oxygen monitor clipped to her small finger, blonde curls still damp against the pillow. The girl who'd given him a peanut butter sandwich and called him secret friend when the whole world called him nothing. He looked at the text again, stay quiet or she drowns for real. Then he looked at the door where Colt and Garrett were still talking in low, urgent voices about cut fences and bolt cutters and a vice president who'd been spotted near the scene of what was beginning to look less like an accident and more like attempted murder. 8 years old, holding a phone with a death threat, holding a secret that could expose a killer or condemn a child, holding the weight of a choice no child should ever have to make. He deleted the message, not because he was going to stay quiet, but because he needed to think, needed to figure out the right moment, the safe moment, the moment when telling wouldn't cost Daisy her life, because Sawyer Hollis had survived 6 months on American streets by knowing one thing better than anything else. Timing was everything. And right now, with Briggs watching, with the threat still warm on his phone, with a 5-year-old girl's life hanging on his silence, the timing wasn't right. But it would be. Soon. And when it was, Sawyer would do what he'd done at the canal, what he'd done every day for 6 months, what his mother had taught him before the drugs taught her how to disappear. He would survive. And this time, he wouldn't survive alone. Daisy's hand found his in her sleep, small fingers wrapping around his with the unconscious certainty of a child who decided this person was safe, and no amount of logic or danger or common sense would convince her otherwise. Sawyer held on, tight, like she was the only solid thing in a world made of water and threats and fathers he didn't know he had, and mothers who'd lied to protect him, and men who cut fences and sent death threats to 8-year-old boys. Outside the room, Colt's voice rose just enough for Sawyer to catch 3 words. I want names. And in the hallway, Garrett's response carried the weight of everything that was coming. You're not going to like where this leads, brother. Sawyer closed his eyes, held Daisy's hand, and waited for the storm that was already here, already inside the walls, already wearing a leather vest and a skull and knife patch, and the patient smile of a man who killed children and called it club business. Sawyer waited until 3 in the morning to tell the truth. Not because he wanted to wait. Every second that passed with Briggs's threat burning a hole through his silence felt like swallowing broken glass. But Sawyer had learned something in 6 months of living on streets that wanted to kill him. You don't show your cards when the room is full of people you can't read. You wait until you're alone with the one person you're betting your life on. Colt was sitting in the chair beside Daisy's bed, hadn't moved in 6 hours, hadn't eaten, hadn't spoken to anyone except in single-word commands that sent bikers scrambling. His vest was still on, his boots still muddy from the canal bank. His eyes were locked on his daughter's sleeping face, like looking away meant she'd stop breathing again. 2 bikers stood guard outside the door, 4 more in the hallway. The Hells Angels had turned the pediatric wing of Memphis General into a fortress overnight. Nurses had stopped complaining about it after Colt offered to fund the entire children's ward renovation if they'd let his brothers stay. Sawyer sat on the floor next to Daisy's bed, wrapped in the horse blanket, pretending to sleep. He wasn't sleeping. He was listening, waiting, counting the seconds between Colt's breaths, measuring the distance between the chair and the door, calculating whether the man would hear him out before the fury took over. At 3:07, when the hallway was quiet and Daisy's monitors beeped steady, and the 2 guards outside were far enough that whispers wouldn't carry, Sawyer spoke. I saw who did it. Colt's head turned. Slow. the movement of a predator hearing a sound it can't quite identify. His eyes found Sawyer in the dark. The boy's face was half lit by the green glow of Daisy's heart monitor. "What did you say?" "The canal, the fence that was cut. I saw someone walking away from the bank right before I pulled Daisy out. He was wearing a vest. Your patches. And a custom patch on the right side, a skull with a knife through it." Colt didn't move, didn't breathe. His body went so still that Sawyer thought for one terrible second that the man's heart had simply stopped. "Say that again." "Skull and knife, right side of the vest. He was walking away from the spot where Daisy fell. Not running, walking, like he'd finished a job." Colt's hands closed into fists, slow, deliberate, the tendons in his forearms pulling tight like bridge cables bearing weight they were never designed to hold. "And you're just telling me this now?" The words came through clenched teeth. 7 hours later, while the man who tried to kill my daughter is walking around free. "You sat in this room for 7 hours and said nothing." "He sent me a message." Sawyer's voice didn't waver. He held out the cracked phone. Screen cracked, battery at 4%, but the deleted message was gone. I deleted it, but it said if I talked, he'd make sure nobody pulled Daisy out next time. Colt took the phone, stared at the empty inbox, then stared at Sawyer with an expression the boy couldn't read. Fury, yes, but something else underneath it. Something that might have been respect or recognition, or the terrible understanding that an 8-year-old child had been carrying a death threat alone for 7 hours to protect a girl he'd known for 4 days. "You should have told me immediately. And if he has people watching, if someone in this hospital is reporting to him," Sawyer's voice dropped lower. "You told Garrett the fence was cut. You said Briggs was supposed to be watching Daisy. You said his bike was near the trailer. Everyone in that hallway heard you. If Briggs has allies, they already know you're suspicious. And if I'd pointed the finger right there, surrounded by people I don't know, people I can't trust, Daisy becomes the target again. I waited until it was just us. Because just us is the only thing I trust right now." Colt stared at this boy. 8 years old, 62 pounds, speaking with the tactical awareness of someone 3 times his age. And every word made sense. Every calculation was correct. The kid had done what Colt himself would have done. Controlled the information, waited for the secure moment, protected the vulnerable asset, his sister's son, Jolene's boy. Thinking like a soldier at 8 because the world had given him no other choice. "You're sure about the patch, skull and knife? I've never seen it on anyone else, only Briggs." Colt stood. The chair scraped against the floor. Daisy stirred but didn't wake. He pulled out his phone, typed 3 words, sent them to Garrett. "Church, 1 hour." Then he looked at Sawyer. "You stay here. Do not leave this room. Do not open that door for anyone except me or Garrett. Anyone else comes through that door, you take Daisy into the bathroom, lock it, and don't come out until you hear my voice. Not a nurse, not a doctor, not a biker. My voice only. Understand? What are you going to do?" What I should have done the second I heard that fence was cut. "I'm calling church, full assembly, every member. If Briggs is there, he'll know you know." That's exactly the point. Colt's eyes went flat. Something in them died, and something else woke up. Something older and colder, and built for exactly this kind of moment. I want him in that room. I want him surrounded. And I want him to understand that the last mistake he ever made was touching my daughter. Colt left. The door closed. The lock clicked. And Sawyer sat in the dark with a sleeping 5-year-old, in the knowledge that somewhere in Memphis, a group of men were about to decide whether justice looked like a courtroom or a cornfield. He didn't sleep, held Daisy's hand and counted her breaths, and waited. 4 hours later, the clubhouse was full. 62 members of the Hells Angels Memphis chapter packed into a room built to hold 40. Standing room only. The air was thick with tension and cigarette smoke, and the particular energy of men who'd been woken at 4 in the morning and told to come armed. Colt stood at the front, Garrett beside him. Between them, a laptop showing the security footage from the neighboring property. The grainy image of a figure in a leather vest approaching the canal fence with something in his hands. Bolt cutters. The timestamp reading 2:47 a.m., the night before Daisy fell. Church is in session. Colt's voice carried the weight of a man about to tear his own organization apart from the inside. Yesterday, my daughter almost died, pulled from the canal by an 8-year-old kid who had no business being the only person between her and a body bag. I was told it was an accident, broken fence, bad luck, weather damage. He hit a key on the laptop. The image zoomed, the figure's hands, the bolt cutters, the clean cut through metal that had been intact 48 hours before. This wasn't an accident. Someone cut that fence. Someone who knew my daughter plays near that canal. Someone who timed it for when I'd be at the run, and Daisy would be watched by whoever drew the short straw. The rooms shifted, 60 men processing the same information at different speeds. Some faces hardened with understanding, others twisted with confusion. A few went deliberately blank, and Colt noticed every single one of them. I have a witness, Colt continued. Someone who saw a brother walking away from that canal bank seconds before Daisy went in. Walking, not running, not helping. Walking away from a drowning child like a man finishing a job. Who? The voice came from the middle of the room, thick, controlled. Briggs stood with his arms crossed, his expression perfectly calibrated to project concern and confusion, and not a trace of guilt. Who's your witness, Colt? The homeless kid? The 8-year-old squatter who's been living under your trailer without you knowing? Every head turned toward Briggs. Colt didn't blink. You seem to know a lot about that kid, Briggs. I never mentioned his age to the full club. I never mentioned where he was staying. That information was in a private conversation between me and Garrett, in the hospital, behind a closed door. The room went electric. 60 men doing the same math, the same terrible equation. If Briggs knew details he shouldn't know, it meant he'd been listening, or someone had been listening for him. Briggs's jaw tightened, just barely, a fraction of a movement that most people would miss. Sawyer wouldn't have missed it. Colt didn't miss it either. Word travels fast in this club, Colt. You know that. Brothers talk. Nobody in that hallway knew the kid's age except me, Garrett, and the admitting nurse. Colt took one step toward Briggs, and nobody knew he'd been living under the trailer. That detail came out in the truck. Just me, the kid, and Daisy. So who told you, Briggs? Silence. The kind that makes your ears ring. The kind that fills a room before something breaks that can't be put back together. Briggs smiled. Not a warm smile. The smile of a man whose mask is slipping and is deciding whether to grab it or let it fall. You're reaching, brother. Grief makes people paranoid. You almost lost your girl. That's terrifying. I get it. But pointing fingers at your VP because some street kid told you a story? That kid could be lying, could be playing you, could have cut that fence himself to set up a rescue and earn your trust. A few heads nodded, doubt seeding itself in the room like spores. Briggs was good at this, smooth, calculated, planting just enough reasonable alternative to make the truth look like paranoia. Then Garrett stepped forward and destroyed everything. I pulled your phone records, Briggs. Club bylaws allow it during a threat investigation. You know that because you wrote that bylaw yourself 3 years ago. Garrett opened a folder. Paper. Old school. Printed records that couldn't be hacked or deleted or denied. 11 calls to a burner phone in the last 2 weeks. 3 of those calls made within an hour of Colt leaving for scheduled runs. 1 call at 2:15 a.m. the night the fence was cut. And 1 call at 3:38 p.m. yesterday, 7 minutes before Daisy fell into that canal. The room exploded, voices shouting, accusations flying, bodies moving, the brotherhood fracturing along lines nobody had known existed until this exact moment. Those records are garbage. Briggs's mask shattered. His voice went from controlled to desperate in the space of one sentence. Circumstantial. Burner phones can't be traced. You've got nothing. I've got more than nothing. Garrett held up his phone. I've also got this. A photo from the gas station camera half a mile from Colt's trailer. Timestamp 3:47 p.m. yesterday. 20 minutes before Daisy went in the water. Do you want to tell the club why you were there when you called in sick with food poisoning? Or should I? The photo was grainy but clear enough. Briggs at the gas station counter, leather vest, skull and knife patch visible on the right side. Buying a pack of cigarettes with the casual ease of a man who had nowhere urgent to be. A man who was waiting, timing something, making sure the schedule held. That proves nothing. I stopped for gas, so what? You don't drive that road to get home, Briggs. Colt's voice was ice cracking over deep water. You live 12 miles in the other direction. The only thing down that road is my trailer, the canal, and a 5-year-old girl you were supposed to be watching. I said I was sick. I asked Tammy to cover. Tammy says you never called her. Garrett didn't look up from his folder. She says the first she heard about watching Daisy was when one of the prospects called her at 4:15, 30 minutes after the kid pulled your president's daughter from the water. You didn't call anyone, Briggs. You left Daisy alone. On purpose. Near a fence you'd cut the night before. The room divided. Half the members pulled back from Briggs like he was radioactive. The others stayed close, uncertain, loyalty and doubt fighting for territory on their faces. Briggs looked around, counting allies, counting exits, the mathematics of a cornered animal calculating whether to fight or run. This is a setup, he said. His voice dropped the pretense of innocence, went cold, hard. The real voice underneath the politician's smile he'd been wearing for years. You want to destroy me over a street kid's word and some phone records? Fine. Let's talk about what's really happening here. Let's talk about how our president has gone so soft that he's bringing strays into the club. First a daughter who gives him nightmares, now a homeless nephew nobody can verify. What's next, Colt? You going to adopt every broken thing that washes up at your door? Don't. Colt's voice dropped to something sub-zero. Don't talk about my children. Your children are killing this club. Briggs stepped forward, pointed his finger at Colt's chest. Every decision you've made for the last year has been about that little girl. Every run you've missed. Every deal you've passed on. Every opportunity you've thrown away because Daddy has to be home for bedtime. The Memphis chapter used to be feared. Now we're a daycare with motorcycles. Is that why you tried to drown a 5-year-old? To make a point about leadership? I tried to save this club. The words erupted from Briggs like they'd been building pressure for years. Someone had to. You weren't going to. Too busy braiding hair and reading bedtime stories. Too busy being father of the year while our territory shrinks and our reputation dies. The confession landed like a bomb. Not full, not detailed, but enough. Enough for 60 men who'd been watching and listening and doing their own math to arrive at the same answer simultaneously. Briggs realized what he'd said. The color drained from his face. The mask was gone now. Nothing left but the raw machinery of a man who'd miscalculated the one thing you can never miscalculate. The moment when the truth becomes more powerful than the lie. That's not what I meant. He backpedaled. I'm talking about priorities, about leadership philosophy. I didn't. You just admitted it. A biker named Corbin, 20-year veteran, arms like bridge cables, stood up from his seat against the wall, in front of 60 brothers. You just said you tried to save the club from a 5-year-old girl by drowning her. That's not what I... Sit down and shut up. Colt's voice cut through the room like a blade dropped from height. Or don't sit down, your choice, but understand that the next words out of your mouth determine whether you leave this room walking or carried. Briggs's hand moved toward his waistband. 3 guns came out before his fingers reached the leather. 4 more a half second later. The click of safeties disengaging sounded like bones breaking in the sudden silence. Easy, Briggs raised his hands. Slow, his eyes darting from gun to gun, calculating odds that had just collapsed from slim to zero. Let's everybody just calm down. You tried to kill a child. Colt's gun was aimed at Briggs's center mass. Steady, no tremor, the hand of a man who'd held weapons longer than he'd held his daughter. My child, my blood, you cut a fence and walked away while she drowned. And you sit there and call her a liability. She was supposed to be a message. Briggs's voice changed again, dropping the outrage, dropping the defense, settling into something cold and honest and terrible. A message you refuse to hear any other way. I told you 6 months ago, the girl makes you weak. I told you to send her away. I told you the club can't function with a president who answers to a 5-year-old's bedtime schedule. You could have called a vote, challenged me clean, and lost, because half these idiots love the daddy routine, think it makes you relatable. Briggs spat the word like poison. I needed you broken, Colt, needed you grieving, needed you so destroyed by loss that you'd step down and let someone with actual vision lead this chapter. The room absorbed this in absolute silence, every man present processing the reality that their vice president had tried to murder a child as a political strategy. Not passion, not rage, politics. The calculated removal of a 5-year-old girl from the equation because her existence inconvenienced his ambition. Then Garrett spoke one more time, and everything got worse. There's something else. His voice carried the particular weight of a man about to drop the final bomb in a building already crumbling. I said I pulled phone records. The burner Briggs was calling. We couldn't trace it to a name, but we traced it to a location. The calls were received in Nashville, Tennessee. Cross-referenced with cell tower data. The phone was active in the same area as a motel called the Riverside Inn on August 19th of this year. Nobody moved. August 19th, Colt repeated the date. His voice had changed. Something had broken underneath the anger. Something that sounded like the beginning of a grief so deep it could swallow cities. That's the day Jolene died. Garrett nodded. The Riverside Inn is 3 blocks from the gas station where Sawyer's mother overdosed. The burner phone Briggs has been calling was in that area on that date, active for 6 hours. Then it went dark. The mathematics were simple, brutal, final. Colt looked at Briggs, and Briggs saw the answer in Colt's eyes before the question was asked. Saw it and knew that no lie, no manipulation, no political calculation would survive what came next. Did you kill my sister? The room held its breath. 60 men, one question, one truth that would either save or destroy everything. Briggs laughed, short, bitter, the laugh of a man who's been caught so completely that pretense becomes pointless. She called me, he said, 3 months ago. Said she needed money. Said her kid was sick. Said she was thinking about reaching out to you. After 16 years of nothing, she was going to walk back into your life and hand you another weakness, another child, another reason to go soft. I couldn't let that happen. The words fell into the room like bodies into graves, one after another, each one heavier than the last. I found her at that motel. She was already using, already halfway gone. All I did was make sure the dose was strong enough to finish the job. Hot shot, pure, fast. She probably didn't even feel it. And I made sure the kid wasn't there when it happened. Sent him on an errand. Told him some guy at the gas station had free food. By the time he came back, it was done. Colt made a sound. Not a word, not a scream. Something between a groan and a roar that came from the bottom of his chest and contained 16 years of searching for a sister who'd been alive the whole time and was now dead because a man he trusted decided she was inconvenient. He crossed the room in 2 steps, hit Briggs so hard the man's feet left the ground. The crack of jaw meeting fist echoed off every wall. Briggs hit the floor. Colt followed him down, fists connecting with flesh in sounds that made half the room flinch, and the other half watch with the cold satisfaction of men witnessing justice they'd been denied by courts and laws and a system that didn't protect people like them. Two brothers pulled Colt off before he could finish it, held him back while Briggs spat blood and teeth onto the concrete floor and tried to remember how to breathe. "Not like this." Garrett's voice cut through the chaos. "Not here, not now. We do this right or we don't do it at all." "He killed Jolene." Colt's voice was barely human. "He drowned my daughter. He murdered my sister. And you want me to do this right? I want you to do this in a way that doesn't put you in prison and leave those two kids with nobody." Garrett held Colt's eyes. "Sawyer and Daisy need you alive and free, not locked up for beating a man to death in front of 60 witnesses. Give me the phone records. Give me the gas station footage. Give me the cut fence and the cell tower data. Let the law bury him. Let him rot in a cell for the rest of his miserable life, knowing that those kids are safe and loved and living the life he tried to destroy." Colt's chest heaved, blood on his knuckles, fury in his eyes, and underneath it all, the desperate, terrifying love of a man who discovered two children in the space of 24 hours and would burn the world to ash before he let anyone hurt either of them again. On the floor, Briggs coughed blood and smiled through broken teeth. "You think this is over? You think I'm the only one? There are 3 more, Colt. 3 brothers who agree with me, who helped plan this, who watched that fence get cut and said nothing. You want names? I'll give you names, but it'll cost you. It costs you nothing." Colt knelt beside Briggs. His voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the room. "Because you're going to tell me everything, every name, every plan, every conversation. Not because I'm offering a deal, but because if you don't, I'm going to let every brother in this room spend 5 minutes alone with you. 60 brothers, 5 minutes each. Do the math. That's 5 hours. And I promise you, Briggs, you won't make it past the first 30 minutes. Briggs looked around the room. 60 faces. Not one sympathetic. Not one uncertain. The Brotherhood had rendered its verdict. Unanimous. Absolute. He gave the names. 3 men, 2 prospects and a veteran named Dale who'd been with the club for 8 years. Each one confirmed through phone records that Garrett had already pulled. Each one connected to the burner phone network. Each one complicit in the murder of Jolene Hollis and the attempted murder of Daisy Raines. They were in the room, all 3, and the moment their names left Briggs's broken mouth, they moved. Dale went for the back door, made it 4 steps before 2 brothers the size of refrigerators cut him off. The prospects tried to blend into the crowd, tried to disappear among the leather and patches. But you can't disappear in a room full of men who've been trained to notice everything. They were found in seconds, dragged forward, thrown to the ground next to Briggs. 4 traitors in a club of 62. The math shouldn't have mattered, but it did. 62 minus 4 equals 58 men who'd stayed loyal, who'd chosen their president and his children over ambition and violence and the cold calculations of men who murdered women and drowned little girls. Colt stood over all 4 of them, blood still on his fists, tears still on his face. The impossible combination of a man who was simultaneously falling apart and holding everything together through sheer force of will. Garrett was already on the phone. Federal contacts, law enforcement connections the club maintained for exactly these kinds of situations. The complicated, contradictory relationship between outlaws and the law, when the crimes committed were too monstrous for even outlaws to handle alone. Briggs looked up from the floor, one eye swelling shut, blood pooling beneath his head. And he said the last thing he would say as a free man. That kid in the hospital, Sawyer, he's the one who ruined everything. If he hadn't been under that trailer, if he hadn't pulled her out, if he hadn't seen me at the canal, none of this would have happened. An 8-year-old homeless boy destroyed a plan I spent 6 months building. Think about that. An invisible kid, a nobody, and he brought down everything. Colt looked at him for a long time. Then he said something that carried across the room and settled into the bones of every man present. He's not invisible. Not anymore. He's my blood. He's my family. And he's braver than every man in this room combined, including me. Colt turned his back on Briggs, walked to the door, stopped. Garrett, make the calls. I want them all in federal custody by sunrise. I'm going back to the hospital. My kids need me. He walked out into the Memphis night, got on his motorcycle, and rode toward the hospital where an 8-year-old boy was sitting in the dark, holding a 5-year-old girl's hand, waiting for a storm to pass that he'd helped create by choosing the most dangerous thing an invisible child could do. He'd let himself be seen. Colt walked into the hospital room at 5:47 in the morning with blood still drying on his knuckles and his sister's death confirmed by the man who'd caused it. Sawyer was exactly where he'd left him, on the floor beside Daisy's bed, blanket around his shoulders, one hand holding hers through the bed rail, not sleeping, watching the door with the hypervigilance of a child who'd learned that closed doors don't mean safety and promises don't mean permanence. The boy's eyes found Colt's hands first. The blood, the swollen knuckles, the split skin across the second and third metacarpals where bone had met bone and bone had lost. Is it done? Colt lowered himself into the chair. His body moved like a man carrying weight that had nothing to do with muscle and everything to do with the last 12 hours catching up with him all at once. He looked at Sawyer, looked at this 8-year-old boy sitting on a hospital floor, asking questions that belonged in war rooms and courtrooms and the kind of conversations grown men had behind locked doors. Briggs confessed. To all of it, the fence, Daisy, your mother, everything. He's in federal custody, 3 others with him. It's done. Sawyer didn't react the way Colt expected. No relief, no tears, no visible emotion at all, just a slow nod. The kind of nod you give when someone confirms something you already knew, but were hoping somehow wouldn't be true. He killed her on purpose. It wasn't a question, but Colt answered it anyway. Yes, she called him. 3 months ago. Needed money, needed help, was thinking about reaching out to me. He decided she was a threat to his plan, so he made sure she never got the chance. Sawyer's jaw tightened. 8 years old and his face looked ancient, the face of someone processing a grief so enormous that the body doesn't know how to carry it yet, so it just goes still, goes quiet, goes somewhere deep inside where the pain can be examined without killing you. She was trying to find you. The words came out flat, hollow. She was trying to get us help, trying to connect us, and he killed her for it. Yes, so if she hadn't called, if she just kept running, kept hiding, kept being invisible, she'd still be alive. The logic was devastating because it was correct. Jolene Hollis had survived 16 years of addiction and poverty and homelessness, had kept herself and Sawyer alive through conditions that killed stronger people, had endured everything the world threw at her. And the one time she'd reached for help, the one time she'd tried to stop being invisible, it had cost her everything. Colt leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his bloody hands hanging between them. Listen to me. What happened to your mother is not her fault. It's not your fault. It's the fault of a man who decided another person's life was less valuable than his own ambition. That's it. That's the whole truth. But she reached out because of me. Sawyer's voice cracked. First fracture in the wall he'd been holding up for 6 months. She said her kid was sick. That's what Briggs told you, right? She called because I needed help. I was the reason she broke cover. I was the reason she... Stop. Colt's voice was firm, but not hard. The voice of a man who recognized what was happening because he'd done it himself. Sat in rooms and blamed himself for things he couldn't have controlled. Found ways to make other people's crimes his own fault. That's the kind of math grief teaches you. makes you add yourself to equations where you don't belong. Your mother made a choice, a brave choice, the right choice. She chose to ask for help instead of letting her son suffer in silence. That's not weakness, that's love. And the fact that someone punished her for it doesn't make her wrong, it makes him a monster. Daisy stirred. Her eyes opened, unfocused, then found both of them. Her father with blood on his hands, Sawyer with tears he was trying not to let fall. "Daddy? What happened? Why are you sad?" "Come here, baby." Colt lifted her from the bed. Monitors beeped in protest. He didn't care. Held her against his chest with one arm and reached for Sawyer with the other. The boy flinched. Instinct. 6 months of human contact meaning danger. Hands meaning hurt. Closeness meaning someone was about to take something from you. But Colt's hand just rested on Sawyer's shoulder. Heavy, warm, present. Not grabbing, not pulling, just there. "You don't have to run anymore, kid. You hear me? No more trailers, no more crawl spaces, no more stealing food and sleeping in dirt. You're home, both of you. This is home now." Sawyer broke, not loudly, not dramatically. He just stopped holding and let the wall come down. 6 months of grief and cold and hunger and fear and loneliness poured out of him in silent tears that ran down a face too young for the weight it carried. He pressed his forehead against Colt's arm and shook, and didn't make a sound because invisible kids learn to cry quietly. It's safer that way. Daisy reached across and touched Sawyer's hair. Small fingers, gentle. The unconscious tenderness of a child who understood sadness, even if she couldn't name it yet. "Don't cry, Sawyer. Daddy said you're home now. That means you get your own bed and everything. I'll share my toys, and I'll still make you sandwiches, but you can eat them at the table now instead of under the house. That's way better, right?" Sawyer laughed, or sobbed. The sound was somewhere between both, and it contained more human truth than anything any of them had said all night. "Yeah, that's way better." The doctor discharged Daisy at noon. Smoke inhalation, minimal. Hypothermia, resolved. Trauma assessment recommended with a follow-up in 2 weeks. A nurse handed Colt a stack of paperwork and paused when she got to the emergency contact section. "And the boy? Is he family?" "He's my nephew. Do you have documentation? Guardianship papers? Any legal?" "I'm working on it." Colt's voice left no room for additional questions. "He's family. That's all you need to know right now." The nurse looked at Sawyer, at the too big clothes and the hollow cheeks, and the eyes that held more history than most adults accumulated in a lifetime. She'd been doing this job for 22 years. She knew what a kid who'd been through the system looked like. Knew what a kid who'd been failed by every safety net society claimed to provide looked like. "I'll put him down as family," she said softly, "and I'll make sure the social work referral goes to Dr. Abrams. She's the best we have for kids in transition situations. She's kind. He needs kind. Thank you." They walked out of the hospital into noon sun that felt too warm for November. Daisy held Colt's hand on one side and Sawyer's on the other, swinging between them like a bridge connecting two people who'd been strangers 48 hours ago and were now the only family either of them had left. 12 Hell's Angels were waiting in the parking lot. Not the full chapter, the inner circle. The ones Garrett had vetted personally in the hours since Briggs's arrest, cross-referencing phone records and alibis, and the 1,000 small loyalty tests that determined who could be trusted when trust had been weaponized and broken. Corbin, the 20-year veteran who'd first called out Briggs's confession, stepped forward. He was holding a paper bag from the diner down the street. "Got the kids some food. Figured he hadn't eaten real since whenever. There's a burger in there, fries, chocolate shake. The shake's probably melted by now, but it's still good." Sawyer stared at the bag. At this enormous man with arms like tree trunks, offering him a cheeseburger like it was the most natural thing in the world. Like feeding homeless children was just something you did on a Tuesday morning after your organization's vice president was arrested for murder and attempted child killing. Thank you. The words felt inadequate, felt like trying to hold an ocean in a cup, but they were all Sawyer had. Don't mention it, kid. Corbin's voice was rough, gravelly, the voice of a man who'd done things that kept him up at night and was trying to balance the scales one small kindness at a time. You did good. At that canal, you did real good. The convoy drove to a new location. Not Colt's trailer, not with the fence still cut and the canal still deep, and the memory of what had happened there still fresh enough to taste like mud and terror. Garrett had arranged a house. Rental. 3 bedrooms. Quiet street. Far enough from the trailer park that the past couldn't follow them through the windows. Colt carried Daisy inside. She was asleep before he reached the door, exhausted from the hospital and the medication and the enormous effort of being 5 years old and almost dying and not quite understanding why. Sawyer stood in the doorway of the 3rd bedroom. Small room, single bed, clean sheets, a pillow that hadn't been slept on before, a door that closed, a door with a lock. He touched the bed, pressed his palm flat against the mattress like he was testing whether it was real. Then he sat down. Then he lay back and stared at the ceiling and felt the strange, frightening, overwhelming sensation of having a place that was his. Not borrowed, not stolen, not temporary, not contingent on being invisible or quiet or small enough to fit into spaces that weren't meant for human beings. His. He didn't cry this time. He just breathed. Slow, deep breaths that filled his lungs completely for the first time in months because he wasn't trying to be quiet, wasn't trying to take up as little air as possible, wasn't rationing oxygen the way he'd rationed everything else. Colt appeared in the doorway. You good? Yeah. Sawyer's voice was thick. I'm good. Sawyer, Colt hesitated. The hesitation of a man about to say something he'd never said before and wasn't sure how to shape with his mouth. I'm going to get this right. I don't know how to be a parent. Barely figured out how to be a father to Daisy, and I've been at that for less than a year. But I'm going to figure it out. For both of you. And I'm going to start by making sure you never have to sleep in the dirt again. Okay. And we're going to do a DNA test. Not because I need proof. I can see Jolene in your face every time I look at you. Same jaw, same stubbornness. But because the courts need it. Because the paperwork needs it. Because I'm going to legally adopt you, and the state of Tennessee requires documentation that I'm not just some random biker claiming a homeless kid. The word adopt landed in Sawyer's chest like a stone dropped into still water. Ripples spreading outward through everything he thought he knew about who he was and where he belonged. You'd do that? Kid, I'd have done it 9 days ago if I'd known you existed. I spent 5 years looking for your mother. Spent every dollar I could spare trying to find her. If I'd known she had a son, if I'd known you were out there, I would have torn this country apart. But you didn't know. No, I didn't know, and I have to live with that. But I know now, and knowing is where it starts. The DNA test came back in 4 days. Colt paid for expedited processing. The results arrived in a plain white envelope that Garrett hand-delivered to the rental house at 7 in the morning on a Thursday. Colt opened it at the kitchen table. Sawyer sat across from him. Daisy was in the living room watching cartoons, singing along to theme songs with the full-body commitment of a child who decided that yesterday was over and today was for singing. 99.9%. Colt read the number, then read it again, then looked up at Sawyer with eyes that were red before he'd finished the second reading. Familial match confirmed. You're Jolene's son. My nephew, Daisy's cousin. Sawyer had known since the moment Garrett said the name Jolene Raines in the hospital hallway. But hearing it confirmed, seeing it on paper, watching Colt's face crack open with the weight of scientific certainty, made it real in a way that knowing couldn't. What happens now? Now I call my lawyer. We start the guardianship process. Emergency custody first, because you're a minor with no living parent, and I'm your closest biological relative. Then formal adoption once the courts process the paperwork. How long? Months, maybe longer. The system's slow, but you're not going anywhere in the meantime. Garrett's already talking to a judge who owes the club a favor. Not like that. Colt caught Sawyer's expression. A legitimate favor. Garrett helped his daughter get into a treatment program 2 years ago. The judge is a good man. He'll expedite. In school? Colt blinked. Of all the things he'd been prepared for, an 8-year-old asking about education wasn't on the list. You want to go to school? I haven't been in a classroom in over a year. Mom pulled me out when we moved the last time. Said we'd find a new school. We never did. I can read. I can do math. But I'm behind. I know I'm behind. We'll get you caught up. Online tutoring first, if you want. Then regular school when you're ready. No rush, no pressure. I want to go soon. Sawyer's voice was quiet but certain. I don't want to be behind anymore. I don't want to be invisible in that way either. Behind means forgotten, and I'm tired of being forgotten. Colt stared at his nephew, then nodded once. Firm. The nod of a man making a promise he intended to keep with everything he had. Soon, I promise. The weeks folded into each other. November bled into December. Cold settled over Memphis like a blanket pulled too tight. But inside the rental house, something warm was growing. Imperfect, awkward, full of mistakes and miscalculations, and the 1,000 small collisions that happen when broken people try to build something whole from the wreckage of what came before. Colt burned dinner 4 nights out of 7. Overcooked pasta, undercooked chicken. Once set off the smoke alarm making toast, which sent Daisy into a panic that took 20 minutes to calm because smoke alarms sounded like the beginning of something terrible in her young, traumatized mind. Sawyer ate everything. Every burned meal, every overcooked noodle, every piece of toast that was more charcoal than bread. He ate it because it was food prepared by someone who wanted him alive. And that distinction, the difference between food you steal to survive and food someone cooks because they care whether you eat, was the difference between existing and living. Daisy appointed herself the authority on all things related to family structure. She explained the rules to Sawyer daily with the serious conviction of a 5-year-old who decided the universe operated according to her specifications. You're my cousin, but I'm calling you my brother because cousin sounds weird. Brothers live in the same house, and we live in the same house, so that makes you my brother. Also, brothers have to watch cartoons with me on Saturday mornings. That's a rule. I made it up, but it's still a rule. Okay. And brothers share snacks, but not the fruit snacks. Those are mine. You can have the graham crackers. Deal. And brothers don't leave. That's the most important rule. You don't leave. Promise me. The lightness left her voice on that last part. The 5-year-old's understanding that people leave, that mothers go to heaven and don't come back, that the world takes things away from you and doesn't explain why. I promise, Sawyer said, and meant it in every cell of his body. Therapy started the 2nd week of December. Dr. Abrams, the one the hospital nurse had recommended. Kind, like the nurse had promised. Patient. The kind of professional who understood that trust wasn't given in children like Sawyer. It was earned one small interaction at a time over weeks and months of proving you weren't going to disappear. The first session, Sawyer didn't speak for 45 minutes. Just sat in a chair and looked at Dr. Abrams and waited for her to do what every other adult had done. Lose interest. Look away. Decide he was too difficult, too damaged, too far gone for the effort. She didn't look away, didn't lose interest. Just sat with him in the silence and waited. At minute 46, Sawyer said one sentence. I don't know how to stop being invisible. Dr. Abrams tilted her head. You saved a girl's life. Millions of people have seen the video. You're one of the most visible children in America right now. What does invisible mean to you? Invisible means safe. Visible means people can hurt you. I don't know how to be visible and safe at the same time. The video, 80 million views by December, national coverage, local news running updates, a Memphis councilwoman proposing a resolution honoring Sawyer's bravery. Interview requests from networks Colt had never heard of and refused on principle. He's not a story. He's a kid. Let him be a kid. But one interview was granted, local Memphis station. Sawyer agreed because the reporter, a woman named Diane who'd covered Shelby County for 30 years, had done a separate story on homeless children in Memphis, and Sawyer had watched it on Colt's phone and cried. They sat on the couch together, Colt beside Sawyer, Daisy on Sawyer's lap, because she refused to be anywhere else during important events. Diane asked the question everyone wanted answered. Why did you jump into that canal? You're 8 years old. The water could have killed you. Sawyer thought about it, longer than television usually allows for. The cameraman kept rolling. Diane didn't interrupt. Colt held his breath. Because she gave me a sandwich. Sawyer's voice was steady but soft. When I was under the porch, hungry, scared. Nobody in the world knew I was alive, and this little girl crawled under there and gave me half a peanut butter sandwich and said her mommy told her you give sandwiches to people who are sad. She saw me. She was the first person in 6 months who saw me, so when she fell in that water, I couldn't not see her back. That's not bravery. That's just what you do when someone sees you. You see them back. Diane's eyes were wet. The cameraman's hands were shaking slightly. Colt's arm tightened around Sawyer's shoulders. Daisy looked up at her cousin with the pure, uncomplicated admiration of a child who didn't understand viral videos or national media or the concept of heroism as abstract virtue. I told you, sandwiches fix everything. The interview aired that night, 12 million views online within 24 hours. Sawyer's answer, because she gave me a sandwich, became something bigger than a soundbite. It became a sentence people carried with them, shared with their children, taped to refrigerators and wrote on bathroom mirrors, and repeated to themselves when the world felt too broken to bear. Because she gave me a sandwich. Because someone saw me. Because seeing someone is the beginning of saving them. Christmas came quietly. Colt had never decorated a tree before, didn't own ornaments, didn't know the protocol. Sawyer had never had a Christmas tree. Jolene's version of the holiday was whatever motel they happened to be in, maybe a candy bar if she was sober enough to remember the date. They bought a tree too tall for the living room ceiling, had to cut 3 inches off the top, while Daisy supervised with the intensity of a 5-year-old foreman who took Christmas tree aesthetics personally. It's crooked, Daddy. It's fine. It's really crooked. It's a tree, Daisy. Trees are crooked. Not Christmas trees. Christmas trees are supposed to be perfect. Nothing's perfect, baby, but crooked things still work. Crooked things still hold ornaments and lights and the stuff that matters. Crooked's okay. He wasn't talking about the tree. Sawyer knew it. Colt knew it. Even Daisy knew it in the way children know things they can't articulate yet, but feel in their bones. Christmas morning, Colt gave Sawyer a box wrapped in newspaper because he didn't own wrapping paper, and the store was closed, and he'd realized at 11 p.m. on Christmas Eve that he had nothing for the boy, and had spent 2 hours in the garage finding something that mattered. Inside the box was a photograph, old, yellowed at the edges, folded once down the middle where someone had carried it in a pocket for years. Jolene, 17 years old, standing next to a motorcycle, laughing, hair blowing in wind that the camera couldn't capture, but you could feel in the way her body leaned into it. Young and alive and so far from the woman who died on a gas station bathroom floor that they might have been different people entirely. I found it in my old storage unit. Colt's voice was rough. Took it the day before she left. She was so mad at me for taking her picture. Said she looked terrible. She didn't. She looked exactly like you. Sawyer held the photograph with both hands, stared at his mother's face, young, happy, unbroken, before the drugs, before the running, before the years of motels and needles and the slow erasure of everything she used to be. She was beautiful. Yeah, she was. Thank you. Merry Christmas, kid. Daisy gave Sawyer a drawing. Crayon on construction paper. Two stick figures holding hands. One tall with brown hair, one short with yellow curls. Behind them, a house with a crooked chimney and smoke that spiraled up in purple loops. Above them, a sun that smiled. And underneath, in 5-year-old handwriting that wobbled with effort but carried truth in every misspelled letter. My brother Sawyer, he saved me. He is the bravest person I know. I love him forever. Sawyer hung it on his bedroom wall, right above the pillow, where he'd see it first thing every morning when he opened his eyes in a room that was his, in a house where people knew his name and cooked him food and called him family. January brought the trial. Briggs and his 3 co-conspirators faced federal charges. Murder in the first degree for Jolene, attempted murder for Daisy, conspiracy, evidence tampering, witness intimidation. The list was long enough to guarantee that none of them would see the outside of a prison cell for the rest of their natural lives. Sawyer testified via video link. The court allowed it because of his age and the nature of the crimes, and because Dr. Abrams submitted a 40-page evaluation explaining that putting an 8-year-old child in the same room as the man who'd murdered his mother would constitute a form of re-traumatization that the legal system had no right to inflict. He sat in a room at the courthouse with Colt on one side and Daisy on the other, faced a screen showing the courtroom. The prosecutor asked questions. Sawyer answered them. What did you see at the canal, Sawyer? A man walking away, wearing a vest with a skull and knife patch. Walking, not running. Like he was done with something. Did you later learn who that man was? Yes, his name is Briggs. He was the vice president of my uncle's motorcycle club. And your mother, Jolene Hollis. Can you tell the court what happened to her? She died, August 19th. They said it was an overdose, but it wasn't an accident. Briggs killed her because she tried to call my uncle, because she tried to get us help, because she tried to stop being invisible. His voice didn't break, didn't waver. 8 years old, testifying in a murder trial, and his voice held steady because he owed his mother that. Owed her the truth spoken clearly in a room full of people who could ensure that truth became justice. The jury deliberated for 3 hours, guilty on all counts. All 4 defendants. Life without parole for Briggs, 30 to life for the others. Colt was standing in the courthouse hallway when the verdict came through. He leaned against the wall and closed his eyes and breathed for what felt like the first time in months. It's over, Garrett said beside him. Number Colt opened his eyes. It's not over, it's just starting. The hard part. The part where I figure out how to give those kids a life that's worth everything it cost to get here. February, Memphis Cemetery. Cold morning, frost on the grass. Colt had arranged a proper burial for Jolene. Headstone, flowers, the acknowledgement that she had existed and mattered, and left behind a son who carried her jaw and her stubbornness and her survival instinct. 200 bikers came, stood in rows behind Colt and Sawyer and Daisy, silent, present, leather and chrome, and the particular kind of respect that men who've lived hard lives show to the dead. Not soft, not performative, just there, bearing witness. Sawyer stood at the grave, held Daisy's hand, looked at the headstone where his mother's name was carved in stone that would outlast all of them. Hey, Mom. His voice was quiet. Just for her. Just for the cold ground and the stone and whatever existed beyond the things you could touch. I found them. Found the family you ran from. Found the brother you were trying to call when they killed you. He's not what you were afraid of. He's trying. He's burning dinner and buying the wrong kind of cereal. And he put my bed together backwards twice before Garrett fixed it. But he's trying. And that's more than anyone ever tried for us. He paused, squeezed Daisy's hand. I'm not invisible anymore, Mom. People see me, a lot of people, 80 million on that video. But the number doesn't matter. What matters is Daisy sees me, Colt sees me, and I see them. And that's what you wanted, isn't it? When you called Briggs, when you tried to reach out, you wanted someone to see us, to help, to make it so I didn't have to sleep under porches and steal food and be a ghost. You were brave, Mom. You were so brave, and I'm sorry it cost you everything. But I promise you, I promise on this stone and this ground, and every sandwich Daisy ever made me, I'm going to be okay. We're all going to be okay. Daisy tugged his hand, looked up at him with those blue eyes that saw everything and understood more than any 5-year-old should. Is your mommy in heaven too? Like my mommy? Yeah, I bet they're friends up there. I bet my mommy made your mommy a sandwich. Because that's what you do when someone's sad. You give them a sandwich and you sit with them and you don't leave. Sawyer looked down at this girl, this tiny, fierce, impossibly kind girl who'd crawled under a porch and changed the entire trajectory of his life with half a peanut butter sandwich and 4 words. Are you hiding from the monsters too? Yeah, Sawyer said. I bet they're friends. They stood at the grave until the frost melted, until the sun came up high enough to warm their faces, until Colt put one hand on Sawyer's shoulder and one hand on Daisy's and said the only thing left to say, let's go home, kids. And they did. 6 months changed everything and nothing. Sawyer was 9 now. Birthday came and went in March with a cake Colt bought from a bakery because he'd learned the hard way that baking was not a skill you develop in a kitchen you've already set on fire twice. Daisy insisted on decorating it herself. Pink frosting on a chocolate cake. Sprinkles in patterns that only made sense to a 5-year-old's logic. 9 candles plus 1 extra because Daisy said the extra one was for good luck. And you don't argue with someone who believes that hard in luck. Sawyer blew them all out in one breath. Daisy asked what he wished for. He said he couldn't tell, or it wouldn't come true. But he didn't wish for anything. That was the truth he kept to himself. For the first time in his life, Sawyer Hollis had nothing left to wish for. Everything he needed was sitting at that table. The adoption papers came through on a Tuesday in April. Colt drove to the courthouse in a truck that still smelled like motor oil, no matter how many times he cleaned it. Sawyer sat in the passenger seat wearing clothes that fit him now. Gained 11 pounds since November. Haircut. Shoes that were actually his size. He still looked too thin, still carried shadows under his eyes that Dr. Abrams said would fade with time and safety and the slow accumulation of days where nothing terrible happened. The judge was the one Garrett knew. Older man, kind face, the kind of judge who'd seen enough broken families come through his courtroom to recognize when one was being put back together instead of torn apart. Mr. Raines, you understand that by signing these documents, you're assuming full legal and financial responsibility for this child? Yes, Your Honor. And Sawyer, the judge looked at him over reading glasses that sat crooked on his nose. You understand what this means? That Mr. Raines will be your legal guardian? Your parent in the eyes of the law? Yes, sir. Is this what you want? Sawyer looked at Colt, at this man who burned dinner and assembled furniture backwards and had blood on his hands from a life that wasn't gentle. This man who'd carried him out of a hospital and given him a room with a door that locked and hung a photograph of his mother on the wall because he understood that grief needed a place to live. Yes, sir, this is what I want. The gavel came down. Colt signed. Sawyer signed. Daisy, who'd been told she could not sign legal documents because she was 5, signed anyway in purple crayon on a napkin she'd brought from home and handed it to the judge with the solemn authority of someone completing important government business. The judge smiled, accepted the napkin, told Daisy he'd file it with the official record. Outside the courthouse, Colt stood on the steps and didn't move for a long time. Just stood there with one hand on Sawyer's shoulder and Daisy hanging off his other arm and the Memphis sun hitting them all sideways, like even the light wanted to be part of this moment. You okay? Sawyer asked. Yeah, kid, I'm okay. Just trying to figure out how I went from a guy who couldn't keep a houseplant alive to a father of 2 in 6 months. You're not great at the houseplant thing. Sawyer's mouth twitched. The fern in the kitchen is definitely dead. That fern was dead when I bought it. I'm maintaining its legacy. Daisy pulled on Colt's sleeve. Daddy, can we get ice cream? This is a ice cream day. The judge said I did good with my napkin. I deserve ice cream. Everyone deserves ice cream today, baby. They got ice cream. Sawyer chose vanilla because he'd never had the luxury of being picky, and the simplest thing on the menu still felt like a miracle when it was something you chose instead of something you scavenged. The program started in May. Sawyer's idea, born from a conversation with Dr. Abrams, where she'd asked what he wanted to do with what had happened to him. Not what he wanted to forget or what he wanted to move past, but what he wanted to build from the wreckage. I want to teach other kids like me, the ones sleeping under porches and in alleys and behind dumpsters. I want to teach them that being invisible doesn't have to be permanent. Dr. Abrams leaned forward. What would you teach them? CPR, first aid, how to fix things, how to ask for help when you've been taught that asking means danger, how to be visible without being afraid. The Visible Kids Project launched from the Hells Angels Clubhouse on the first Saturday in May. Colt provided the space. Garrett handled logistics. Corbin and 6 other brothers volunteered as mentors, teaching basic mechanical skills to children who'd never been handed a tool that wasn't being used to threaten them. Sawyer taught the CPR class, 9 years old, standing in front of 15 kids ranging from 7 to 13, demonstrating chest compressions on a practice dummy the Memphis Fire Department donated after the chief saw the viral video and called Colt personally to ask how he could help. You don't have to be big. Sawyer's voice carried across the room, steady, clear, the voice of a kid who'd been invisible and decided that invisibility was a choice you could unmake. You don't have to be strong. You don't have to be brave. You just have to be there. You just have to not look away. That's all CPR is. It's choosing not to look away when someone needs you. Daisy was his assistant, 6 years old now. Bossy in the way only little sisters could be. She wore a handmade vest that said, Junior Helper, and took the role so seriously that she once corrected a 12-year-old boy's hand placement on the CPR dummy with the authority of a seasoned paramedic. No, like this, hands in the middle, push hard. My brother taught me, and he saved my actual life, so he knows what he's talking about. The boy looked at Sawyer. Sawyer shrugged. She's right. Listen to her. Other chapters heard about it. Nashville first, then Atlanta, then Houston. Hells Angels clubhouses across the South opening their doors to homeless children on Saturday mornings, teaching them to fix bicycles and cook simple meals and perform first aid, and believe that they deserved to take up space in a world that had tried to erase them. The image went national. Bikers kneeling next to children, leather-vested men with scarred hands gently showing small fingers how to hold a wrench. The contradiction of it, the beauty of it, the truth that people are more complicated than the worst thing they've ever done, and sometimes the most dangerous-looking hands are the gentlest ones. June, a Saturday. Sawyer finished class and was cleaning up tools when a girl named Harper walked through the door. 7 years old, dark hair matted and dirty, eyes empty the way Sawyer's used to be empty, the hollow stare of a child who'd learned that expecting nothing was safer than hoping for something. She didn't speak, didn't make eye contact, stood just inside the doorway like she was ready to run the second anyone moved too fast or spoke too loud. Sawyer recognized her immediately. Not her face, her posture, her stillness. The particular way she held her body, pulled in tight, taking up as little space as possible, trying to shrink until the world forgot she was there. He didn't approach her, didn't ask questions. He grabbed a second chair, set it beside his, sat down, and started working on the CPR dummy's valve like it was the most important task in the world. Harper stood in the doorway for 11 minutes. Then she took one step inside, then another. Then she sat in the empty chair beside Sawyer and watched his hands work without saying a word. He let the silence hold, didn't fill it, didn't pressure, just worked, present, visible, there. The next Saturday she came back, sat in the same chair, watched, didn't speak. The third Saturday, Sawyer brought 2 peanut butter sandwiches, put one beside her, ate his own, didn't look at her, didn't comment, just ate. Harper picked up the sandwich, held it, looked at it for a long time, then took a bite, then another until it was gone, and her hands were still and her eyes were wet. The fourth Saturday she spoke. Were you invisible too? Yeah, for a long time. How did you stop? Someone gave me a sandwich. Sawyer's voice was soft, the softest it had been since the canal. And she said her mommy told her you give sandwiches to people who are sad. And that was it. That's all it took. One sandwich. One person seeing me. Everything changed after that. Harper looked at her empty hands, at the crumbs where the sandwich had been. Can you teach me? Yeah, I can teach you. She started coming every week, started speaking, started eating without being prompted, started looking people in the eyes. Small changes, glacial, the kind of progress that only people who'd been invisible themselves could recognize and celebrate. By September, 27 children were enrolled in the program. 27 formerly invisible kids learning to fix things and feed themselves and perform CPR and believe that they mattered. 27 small lives slowly filling with the radical, dangerous, necessary conviction that they deserved to be seen. The 1-year anniversary of the canal fell on a Tuesday in November. Colt drove them out to the old trailer park. The trailer was still there. Someone else lived in it now. But the canal bank had been transformed. The county had installed proper fencing, steel railings, warning signs, and someone, nobody knew who, had painted a mural on the retention wall beside the water. 2 figures, one small, pulling the other from blue waves. Above them, words in letters bright enough to read from the road. We see you. Daisy held Sawyer's hand, looked at the mural, looked at the canal. Her grip tightened. Sawyer, are you still hiding from the monsters? No, he squeezed back. I stopped hiding because you crawled under a porch and gave me a sandwich and showed me that being seen was better than being safe. Colt stood behind them, put his hands on both their shoulders. The weight of him, the warmth, the impossible, improbable, stubbornly persistent reality of a family built from wreckage and peanut butter and a 5-year-old girl's decision that the hungry boy under her porch deserved to eat. Sawyer had written something the night before, on paper, with a pen Colt gave him. He'd asked Colt to post it online because Sawyer didn't have social media and didn't want it, but wanted the words out there for the kids who needed them. Colt posted it that morning. By noon, it had 2 million shares. 1 year ago, I was invisible, sleeping under a porch, eating scraps, trying to be so small the world would forget I existed. Then a 5-year-old girl crawled into the dark and gave me half a peanut butter sandwich. She didn't see a homeless kid. She saw a person, and that was enough. That was everything. To every invisible kid reading this, you are not forgotten. You are not worthless. You are not the sum of what's been done to you. Someone sees you. Maybe not today, maybe not yet, but they will. And when they do, let them. Let them see you. Let them feed you. Let them hold your hand and tell you that you matter. Because you do. You matter so much, and being seen is not the end of being safe. Being seen is where being saved begins. We're visible now, all of us, and we're never going back. That night, the house was quiet, Daisy asleep, Colt on the porch with coffee, Sawyer beside him. 2 people who hadn't known each other existed 1 year ago, sitting in comfortable silence, watching Memphis lights blink against a November sky. You did good, kid. Colt's voice was rough, not with anger, with the particular hoarseness of a man who'd spent a year learning that strength wasn't about fists or guns or the ability to make a room go quiet when you walked in. Strength was about showing up, again and again, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. Your mother would be proud. She'd be proud of you too. Sawyer looked at his uncle. His father now, in every way that mattered. You stopped burning dinner. I did not stop burning dinner. I just got better at scraping the burnt parts off. That's growth. That's survival, kid. Same thing. They sat until the coffee went cold and the stars came out, and somewhere across Memphis, 27 invisible children slept in shelters and foster homes and under porches and behind dumpsters, carrying in their pockets the small, stubborn knowledge that someone saw them. That a 9-year-old boy who'd been exactly where they were had stood in a room full of strangers and said, "You matter, you're visible, and broken things can be fixed." Sawyer Hollis had started this story under a porch, cold, hungry, invisible, forgotten. He'd pulled a drowning girl from a canal with hands too small for the job. He'd exposed a killer. He'd testified in a courtroom. He'd found a father and a sister and a family he didn't know was waiting for him 20 miles from where his mother died. And now he stood in a clubhouse every Saturday teaching invisible children that the most dangerous, most courageous, most necessary thing they would ever do was let someone see them. Let someone in. Let someone hand them a sandwich and sit beside them and not leave. Because that's how you survive. Not by hiding, not by shrinking, not by making yourself so small the world forgets you're there. You survive by standing up, by being counted, by choosing to be visible even when it terrifies you. The boy under the porch became the boy at the canal, became the boy in the courtroom, became the boy who taught other invisible children that they were worth saving. And he never went back to being invisible again.